Sometimes. So today we're really honored to have an author who has written a couple of books. And the first one is Landry Park. And the second is Jubilee Manor, which is a sequel to this one. Right. I know Allison has read it and someone else has. I'm not sure which one. But anyway, we are going to be inspired to become readers, I hope. Possibly even authors, because I know some of you really have some good ideas in your heads about books and things, but you don't just sit down and plot out a story and tomorrow it's done. It's a lot of work. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Bethany Hagen, who is a wife and a mother of two.
I promise I'm not fiddling with my phone because I don't like you. I put my notes on my phone last night when my husband was telling me about his day. I was like, that's sweet, honey. Okay, so it was about his car. It wasn't anything exciting. So I'm Bethany Hagen, and I've lived in Kansas City all my life. I actually grew up on the Missouri side in a little town called Grandview, and then my parents were split. So my dad lived in Olathe, my mom lived in Grandview. And then my mom and my stepmom in high school decided that they were going to move out to like Lone Jack, and then I was welcome to come with them, and I said, no thanks, I'm going to move to Olathe. So I did, and so then I spent the rest of my schooling, including my college, on the Kansas side. And I went to KU, and I got my degree in creative writing. But really, I feel like all of Kansas City belongs to me. And so when I set out to write Landry Park, I really wanted it to be a Kansas City novel. I wanted it to reflect the city that I grew up in, and with all of the best parts of it, and all of the worst parts of it. Because even though it's home, even though I love it, I recognize that there's a lot of work to make this a better city. And so that's kind of where my Kansas City-ishness comes into Landry Park. So I'm gonna babble to you guys a little bit about how I got started and kind of like what writing looks like as a process, and a little bit about publishing. But really, I think it's more interesting when you guys ask me questions. So I'll babble for a little bit, and then I want you guys to come to me with your questions. And I know teachers say it all the time, there's no stupid questions. I really mean it. There are no stupid questions. In fact, if you want to ask me where I got my shoes, I'd be happy to tell you. It's notcloth.com. So how did I get started as a writer? Well, there's a lot of great things about being a writer, and one of the best things about being a writer is that you don't have to start with a specific set of things. So a lot of professions, like being a doctor or being a lawyer, you have to have a certain set of skills and a certain set of schooling for. But being a writer, you can do anything and become a writer. So I know people who have been lawyers for 30 years and then they decided they were going to write a book. I know chemical engineers who decided they didn't want to do chemical engineering anymore, so they were going to write a book. I know someone who's a neuroscientist in Georgia right now who writes young adult books on the side. And so everyone's how I became a writer story is a little bit different. But the common theme I've noticed, and this was true for me too, is that it always starts with being a reader. So I think people who really enjoy stories are the kind of people who are drawn to start creating stories of their own. And when I say reader, I really just mean sort of a consumer of stories. So maybe you don't read a lot of books, but maybe you really love TV shows, or maybe you really love movies. And TV shows and movies are just a different kind of writing. It's screenwriting, it's a little bit different, but at its heart, it's still storytelling. And so if you feel drawn to those things that have compelling stories, if you lay awake at night because you just watched an amazing movie or your favorite TV show and that episode was just so good, that's a storyteller's heart burning within you, even if you didn't read the words on a paper. So I was a reader. I would used to go to the Central Library in Johnson County, or the Redbridge Mid-Continent Library, and I would check out like 30 books at a time, which at the time was the limit for like a kid to check out. And I'd read them all within like 2 days, and we'd have to go and get more. And then I got to the point that I had read all the books that the library has. Then we had to start ordering in from other libraries. And I was reading like not high literature. I was reading like Nancy Drew, but not even like the good old Nancy Nancy Drews, like the 1980s Nancy Drews, and like Goosebumps. Like they weren't, it's not like I was reading Dostoevsky when I was 7. But my mom was a really big believer in that reading should be fun. And so when you're reading in your spare time, you should read things that speak to you. When I was a librarian, I struggled with this a lot because I worked at a Prairie Village, and a lot of those kids are really smart, and their parents really wanted them to be reading. They wanted their 9-year-old girls to be reading Jane Eyre. They didn't want them to be reading Captain Underpants. But if you really like Captain Underpants, if a kiddo really responds to it, then they should be reading it, because reading should be fun. And we know from all of these different studies that kids who read for fun are way more likely to go on to college, to go on to get graduate degrees, and then find more success and happiness in life overall. I think one of the reasons I really liked to read was because when I was a kid, I always wanted the world to be a little bit bigger than it was. I wanted there to be secrets. And so much of your education is about shrinking those secrets down. So you go to classes and you learn that all of the sort of conceptions and magical thinking that you use to explain the world when you're young, you learn the real reasons why things happen, the real reasons behind rainbows, the real reasons behind rain, what stars are really made of. And that's important, right? Like, it's important to learn actual knowledge. But in a way, I found that I kept wanting those things not to be true. Like, I wanted there to be something secret. I wanted to be able to find a secret tunnel into a magical world. And I think that that's why I was drawn to books, because fiction promises that maybe, just maybe, if you're lucky, if you play your cards right, maybe your wardrobe does open up into another world. Or maybe you get a letter to Hogwarts. And so that drew me into books, and even as an adult, those are the stories that I want to tell. That there is more under the surface, because I think in a way that there is. There's things that we can't see or we can't perceive in the ways that we're taught. And I think it's really hard to explain those things in sort of a logical, journalistic style. And I think that's why fiction and poetry is so important. Or song lyrics, if you're into being a lyricist, because you can explain things that are normally unexplainable. So, I was drawn to stories. I started writing stories when I was in 4th grade, really bad, awful stories. The one I remember clearly is that I wrote one for my dad when I was 9 about being shrunk down to the size of Lego people and having to fight like the plastic Lego people. And I was really proud of it. And I'm not this old, but we just had like a computer this old. I had one of those printers that had like holes in the paper on the side, and it was like a dot matrix printer, and then I printed it out, and I like laminated it with tape so that it would be waterproof. I was really excited. And gradually over time, I started writing longer and longer things, until when I was in high school, I had this really lucky opportunity, and it's an opportunity that's presented itself multiple times in my life, where I get to do something on someone else's time, basically. So I had an independent study. And the independent study, it was senior project, and you just got to do whatever you wanted for an hour every day. Like, really deep down what I wanted was to take a nap for an hour every day. But they wouldn't let me do that. But they would let me sit down at a computer and write for an hour every day. I didn't have to do homework. In fact, I made it a rule for myself that I wasn't going to try to use that hour to do homework or catch up on anything else. I was only going to use that hour to do whatever I wanted when it was writing. And that's how I wrote my first novel. It's very terrible. It's a novel about King Arthur. It's very bad. And I got it, I finished it, and it was the first full-length book I had ever written, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then I went to college. And I discovered that the secret, really, to writing is get a job where they don't care what you do. So you get paid $9 an hour to sit at a computer and write. And so that's what I did. I worked at the Johnson County Museum of History. Very small museum. Not a lot of people super interested in the history of Johnson County. So I had a lot of free time to sit down at the computer and write. Because once you get home and you got your homework and you got chores and you got... By that, I got married really young, so I had a husband at home, and sometimes he likes to talk to me or whatever. So by the time I would get book contract, it feels like a really frivolous way to spend time. It kind of feels like a waste of time, honestly, and it's really hard to justify to your loved ones why you want to take time away from them or time away from things you should be doing so that you can basically play with Barbie dolls in your head on paper. So I would use this time at work to do it. And so then I wrote my second novel, and it was a really, really terrible murder mystery. And I decided that I wanted to try to get it published. So I tried and I tried. A few agents read it, and they weren't interested. And they decided that they didn't want to, I wasn't able to find a literary agent with that book. And so I was kind of disappointed for a while, but I was young, so it grows back really fast when you're young. You're like, well, I'll just try again. Now I think I would just be crushed permanently, and then maybe I would become a doctor. So no, I'm not smart enough. But I would probably become like a business accountant or something boring like that. And but I was 19 and I was young, and I was like, I'll just do it again. I'll write another book because I'll just write another book. It'll just be easy. So I did. I wrote a third book, and that book became Landry Park. And so I sold it when I was 24, and it was published by the time I was 26. And believe it or not, that's actually pretty young for a lot of people to publish their first book. So there are a few people like the guy who wrote Aragon. He was 15 when he published that book. When I was young, there was a woman named Amelia Atwater Rhodes. She published her first book when she was 14. But typically, you're looking at your early 30s to publish your first book. And I only say this because I don't want you to feel like, if this is something you want to do, that time is running out and that you have to get started right now. There's always time. There's always time. And so I went to college and I got my creative writing degree. And I say this because I don't want you to feel like you have to get a creative writing degree to be an author. So like I said, you can do any profession and still sit down on a computer and open up a Word document and write a book. And so you should choose a major that really speaks to you, that really calls to you. Because honestly, I think the most important thing is that you have experiences in your life that push you out of your comfort zone, that help you explore the humanity and the environment around you. And those experiences are what will feed your art. So if you decide that you're going to do a job that, you come in contact with a lot of people, I always say I write standing up and I type sitting down. So if you have a job where you're having all these experiences, all day your synapses are firing and you're collecting memories and experiences and things that you will be able to shape into characters and stories. And then you can take that raw material later and make it into a narrative. You can type it all out. And so I actually think if I could go back, I think I maybe wouldn't be a creative writing major. I don't know that I learned anything so fundamental about writing that I couldn't have been an author if I didn't get that major. And I kind of feel like I have to intentionally seek out new inputs because I didn't choose a field that would give that to me. So anyway, if you want to be a writer, pick a major you like. It doesn't have to be creative writing. Although if you do choose creative writing, I really like KU. I know you guys are probably Indian people, but rock job. So the average day for a writer, now that I'm published, looks a lot different than it used to. So before I got published, I was writing on spare time, and I kind of had to create this space for myself away from, I had children kind of young too. I had my first kid when I was 21. And so I had to find time that someone could watch my kids, and also time away from school because I was finishing up college, and also time around homework. And so it was kind of a struggle. And so I found myself writing at really odd hours, like 3 in the morning after the baby had gotten up and then had gone back to sleep. I would stay up and write for 45 more minutes. Or I would write, at midnight. I would write at these really odd hours. And it was exhilarating because I was getting something done and I was pushing something for myself. But it was very tiring. I don't know if I could do it now. And but now that I've gotten published, and I was a librarian for several years until I got published. And last January, actually, I left the library, so now I'm a full-time writer. My average day is I wake up, I take my kids to school, I want to go back to bed, but I don't. I make coffee instead. And then I write 2,000 words. 2,000 words is probably about 5 to 6 pages maybe. I'm trying to think. I don't use Microsoft Word to write. I use a program called Scrivener. And so I write 2,000 words, and it usually takes me anywhere from 4 to 5 hours. I give myself breaks. I'll get up and I'll walk around. I'll have lunch. Sometimes I'll go have coffee with a friend, come back and finish up. And then I leave all of my boring email and social media stuff till the end of the day. And the reason why I watched this really great clip of John Cleese. Do you guys know who John Cleese is? He was in this movie called Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's raining green stuff. John Cleese was in this group called Monty Python and the Flying Circus, and they did a bunch of movies and skits. And he did this inspirational talk at some corporate thing. It's always a corporate thing where they do these talks. But he was talking about how when you write, you have to create a tortoise enclosure for yourself. Like I was talking about, you have to create this safe space, and you can't let anything come into it. So we're so used to working on our computers that it's so easy to click away from what you're working on and check your email. And if you're checking your email, usually there's someone in there who wants you to do something, so I'll just do this real quick, because it always seems so urgent. People who email you have a way of making it sound like we have to talk about this right now. And then if you're on, you might as well just scroll through Tumblr and find a few GIFs while you're at it, and then maybe check on Twitter, and I still have to buy a swimsuit for this summer. And so, it's like this endless trail of distractions. And so I've tried to make it so that my mornings are completely protected. That I don't check my email, I don't get on Tumblr no matter how much I want to, and I just write in my tortoise enclosure. And also, your high-powered thinking has to be done first. Email will drain your brain power, but actually you need to save it. And this is really good advice for homework too. When you are doing homework, when you have to do a lot of creating high level, if you're writing an essay or something like that, you always want to do that first, and then save your short answer reading analysis questions for last, because that creative process needs the most of your brain power. The other thing that I do, the other component of my writing, other than writing and social media, is I have something called critique partners. Now, critique partners are, they're another writer that they write something similar to what you write, and you exchange work and give each other feedback. And this is different than just asking someone to read your stuff. Because when you ask, say, your mom to read your stuff, your mom's probably not going to give you very, critical feedback. Your mom's probably going to be like, oh, honey, I'm so proud of you. Can we put it on the fridge? And so you have to choose your readers carefully, because you don't want them to just give you false praise. But even if they're giving you genuine feedback, they're probably not going to be able to be very specific. So I don't know if you've ever had the experience of watching a movie or reading a book where you've been like, I don't like that. But you're not sure exactly why you didn't like it. It's just sort of a vague feeling, I didn't like it. Well, a critique partner is also a writer, and so they're going to be able to name why something doesn't work for them. So they're going to say, I didn't like this because I felt like your character was two-dimensional. I didn't like this because it took us too long to get into the plot in this chapter. Too much description, too much dialogue. They're going to be able to tell you exactly what you can fix. And I really like exchanging my writing with other people, because then it's mutually assured destruction. They can't be super mean to me, or else I'll be super mean to them. So we have we have to be nice to each other, because we have to keep working together, and they know that I can be really mean. And so reading the work of the few other people that I share work with probably takes up about half an hour to an hour of my day, because everyone is all really productive. And then, of course, there's always the phone calls where they call and we're crying. It's like, do you really think I need to change this? Yeah, I do. So that's kind of what my average day looks like. So how a book gets published is you write a book, and writing is both as easy as it sounds and hard as it sounds. So all you have to do is sit down and write words. It's really easy, but sometimes it can be really hard. And sometimes you can feel almost paralyzed by that blank page.